Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tim Rotek. I am Director of Product Marketing here at Couchbase. And with me today is Scott W. Bradley, the Principal Engineer and Co-Founder of Facet Digital. We're going to be talking about how Facet builds modern applications. So thank you, Scott, for joining. Could you tell me a little bit, the people who are watching, about yourself and Facet Digital? Give us a bit of an overview.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the software industry since the early 90s. I live in the Seattle area and went to the University of Washington and also lived right next to Microsoft. If you all remember the early 90s, that's where a big part of this big .com bubble was coming. Since then, I've worked as a VP and CTO level technologist at many startups and larger companies. And about 10 years ago, one of my coworkers and I broke off to found Facet Digital. We took a lot of startup experience from the industry here across devices, IoT, databases, networking protocols, all kinds of distributed computing problems, and turned ourselves into a consultancy where we help startups get off the ground and get to MVP, and we help skunkworks operations inside of larger companies, break the mold and bend the rules and get things done that they couldn't otherwise. And we help do consulting against gap analysis, risk analysis, market analysis. How do we get our next big hairy business goals achieved with technology, and where are our gaps? And so, throughout that, when getting down to things like Couchbase, we're in a position to recommend technology. We're in a position to replace technologies, or even build up on top of existing technologies in all those domains. So this experience is quite varied when it comes to those kinds of things.
Very cool. And so, how long have you been working with Couchbase in general?
So I think our first project that we started with Couchbase was somewhere around 2011, 2012. So, pretty close to 10 years. And that was V1 maybe, a lot less featured than we have today. But we had a really good success back then with a high volume data processing system for like mobile carrier data. So individual call and text records. So you can imagine working with the Fortune 100, that's billions and billions of rows a month that we were running through Couchbase back in the day. More recently, there's probably a drought for a few years, but more recently, the last 3 years, we've been using Couchbase in a couple of our client projects, as consultants and contractors. We've even come across, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, a large private equity funded startup that needed consulting and figure out how, are we using this thing correctly? And we did some consulting in that area as well. So I would say really, we probably have 5 or 6 years total experience with Couchbase, 3 hot and heavy recently, and 2 years hot and heavy about a decade ago, and a little bit in between.
Okay, great. And I think what I'm curious about is, so when you first started with Couchbase, what drew you to the database and the technology, and versus the alternatives out there?
Yeah, so back 10 years ago, the thing that drew us to it was just the raw scale of ingestion that we were doing, the full in-memory database, the views, which are now, of course, much more substantially replaced by Nickel and FTS, things like that. But being able to horizontally scale and rebalance our cluster. One of our first project with Couchbase, when we first rolled out to, like consumers, we got featured on Good Morning America and Nightline, and it just hockey stick. It wasn't even a hockey stick; it was a straight up 90-degree curve in our usage. And our Couchbase just filled up super fast, and we just added more nodes. We actually had, our biggest bottleneck was asking AWS for permission to add more nodes. And we were pretty proud of how we crushed it there. And so, well, it doesn't directly answer the question. It kind of answers the win that we got from making that decision. And the reason we made that decision was the all in memory database, bringing, letting us ingest that data super fast, and then asynchronously let the view mechanisms catch up on the way it indexes them. So, we were doing a lot of range query type stuff. We were doing a lot of aggregate computations with Couchbase views. And what we were using before that was Microsoft SQL Server. And we were just blowing tons of money and overloading our databases and having to do hard architectural decisions like how do we shard this data. Whereas, when we started looking into NoSQL and we found Couchbase with that, we ended up seeing that we had, we had a good line for being able to solve all those problems in a kind of horizontal way without having to add our own logic around sharding and things like that. It's the homogeneous auto distribution of the data was a big win for us. Those were the key factors that drove us in there at the time.
So, Scott, what about more recently?
More recently, we had a big pharma customer and a kind of IoT gaming hospitality customer, both of which had needs to be global with their data, but honor GDPR and keep some data in Europe. Both of which were going to be high volume ingestion problems, and both of which were going to be pretty narrow use cases that focused around things that we think we could really just do well with JSON documents without the need for massive 3NF normalized relational schemas. So that led us back to saying, hey, we've had great success with Couchbase in the past. Let's use Couchbase. And the few years ago when this conversation happened, XDCR was huge for us because of the GDPR. We can do asymmetric replication. So I can send some data into Europe and some data doesn't come back out. And we set those up. We also, saw the opportunity to scale from 4 customers to 400 customers by building a multi-tenant system where we just add more nodes as capacity grows instead of thinking about provisioning full horizontal stacks for customers. And the general performance and power that we saw on a Couchbase before, that's what led us there. But what stopped us was that it wasn't in a hosted managed solution yet at the time. So really the thing that tipped us in was that beta announcement of Couchbase Cloud, now called Capella. So Capella coming out, we got on early and we're eager to say our client doesn't have a DevOps or SRE kind of team that can manage a cluster day to day. We want that to be managed for us. But my client's customers all require that our data stayed in our VPC because of it's pharmaceutical. We got all kinds of regulations and compliance. So how do we do both? It just so happened that you announced the Capella offering at the right time for us to say, hey, this could solve this for us and investigate it. And we joined early, we worked with it, and it was immediately promising. Our first port off of our prior database, we were spending half the money and running 1 million times faster. I mean, I'm being hyperbolic there, but it was almost immeasurably faster when you look at it from the user's point of view. It went from I wait a bunch to I don't wait ever. That was kind of the big win in our POC. So really seeing it come down to all the good stuff that we knew originally, about speed, performance, and power, horizontal scalability, adding in XDCR, adding in the nickel stuff was really good because we had some stuff that was very relational that we needed to port. So even though I prefer to try to use key value and indexes, free FTS indexes, having the ability to just do some joins and some nickel helped us shift some features over from our old database much quicker. And the cherry on top was now we can keep our data inside the VPC, but have someone else do the operational management, so I don't have to hire people for that. That's really what pushed us there, and why we're still here.
And so for you, what do you describe as better? Is it, do you lean more towards the performance or more towards kind of all the capabilities you get for when you're trying to develop something? Like what's key to you?
Ooh, man, that's a tough question because they're both really important. I'm the kind of engineering manager that says developer time is the most scarcest commodity, right? If you're gonna throw money at things, throwing money at hardware is easy to scale up. Performance, maybe we just overspec our hardware. Not that I want to do those things, but if my developers aren't productive, then nothing else happens, right? And so I think to some extent the one-stop shop of Couchbase is one of the big selling points for us because we were looking at with the client and their architectures. we need to add Elasticsearch. We need to have some relational querying. We definitely want some memory caching. We need some high performance, high scale out type stuff for complex queries and report generators. We need some analytics. We're probably going to do some eventing here pretty soon, which we haven't done yet, where we go changes to one type of document triggered changes to other documents like search indexes. So we were looking at an architecture where we're going to need a queue like RabbitMQ or a stream system like Kafka and free text search system like Elasticsearch and a memcached and all these things. Giving me the one-stop shop means that my developers and my SREs and my teams that are just standing up development environments around this stuff just so much simpler. I run a Couchbase container in a Docker, in Docker on the laptop where I'm working, and I get all those things. I don't have to run all those extra services. So while performance is table stakes to us, like I'm not going to use a database that doesn't perform, right. But the one-stop shop, I think, is kind of the unique deal maker for me.
Yeah. There. Okay. I think in the past you've talked about the performance cost curve. Is that
yes.
How that ties in, or can you expand on that? Or
yeah, and to be honest, it's hard over long term to measure those kinds of things when your feature sets are changing, right? So, we immediately switch from another hosted database as a service, and we come in here and we see that feature for feature, we ported it over pretty quickly, like in the scope of a couple weeks, and we saw that with a handful of nodes, we're spending half as much on our monthly cloud bill. Including our AWS spend, if I go to a cloud and they're giving me an entire hosted system and I don't pick nodes or anything like that, I just look at the total cost. I'm comparing to total cost of running AWS and the licenses for Couchbase. So we cut that cost in half, and some of I wouldn't say everything was quite as dramatic, but some of our key points got, I don't know, like 1,000 times faster. We had some things that were getting bogged down that needed retries. And, I'm sure that on the old database, we could have optimized and spent more money. But from the CFO's perspective and the CEO's perspective, if I can say, hey, I just cut our cost in half and now things are rocking fast. That was, that was the kind of net takeaway there. So, as we go over time on that story, yeah, we're adding more features now. So now it's hard to compare, say, okay, this thing that used to be 1,000 times faster is only now 10 times faster, but we've also added a ton of features to it. So it's doing a lot more work. So it's hard to measure it tracking over time, but I still feel like, we still have jokes internally about, man, if we were still on that old database, this would have been a pain. So I think the ease of use and the ease of getting that performance, right? Like with Capella, I can go into the dashboard, I can add more nodes, I can watch it rebalance, I can see that my queries are performing better now because I've got a better partitioned distributed index, and it's really just not that hard. I mean, sure, I have to touch some code, but mostly I'm clicking buttons in the UI and spinning up more resources.
Right, makes sense. And can you describe, in terms of working with Couchbase, the people here, or just the relationship you've had? How has that been for you and for Facet?
For Facet, they've been great. Having the Couchbase team. I've joined a couple of your. I've even been. You've been so kind as to invite me to a few of your internal fun days. I came and hung out did an Ask Me Anything with you guys. Everybody I've met there seems really cool. In the past, I've worked with some of the marketing folks who have been able to really promote Facet on their marketing materials and conferences. And Facet has been really able to help with case studies and real world question and answer about our experience. And I think it's been a mutually beneficial arrangement. The support team for Capella has been fantastic. I don't want to overpromise anything to anybody, but I feel like they go above and beyond what my SLA is. When I have a problem, they're all over it, and usually get us good resolutions. And when there's workarounds, they come back to us with root cause analysis. It makes me really feel like they're the support teams on top of it. And that gives me some comfort. There is, for an old school operator, there's a little bit of discomfort with handing something off to be managed where I don't get to see how the sausage is made, or I don't get to see what are they monitoring. How will they ever know if this goes down if I don't know if it goes down or whatever? What that really shakes out to is I shouldn't know it goes down, because even if it did, they saved it and put it back up and I didn't miss a beat. And I've gotten a few times on a screen share where I've gotten to see their monitoring dashboards, and it gave me full confidence that they're watching all the things. They're watching the CPUs, the memories, the networking, the health checks, all these things, even at a detailed level into the product index distribution and things like that. So I've gotten a peek behind the curtain at some of those, and I'm pretty impressed with how they work there. And then, with the sales teams, they've been super gracious. We were an early beta partner. They gave us a bunch of free stuff to try it out and give feedback. The roadmap team has been very good in terms of, there have been times where I just said, what would really make my life easier is if you added X to the UI, and 2 weeks later they go, surprise, we added it for you. That's that's been really good. So when I get visibility to the roadmap through things like that, I don't know if that's confidential or not, but when I see them, it also gives me confidence that, okay, even some of the things that it doesn't do now that I might think I want someday, I recognize that Couchbase is thinking about the future and constantly improving. And if you look back 10 years, you can obviously see that's obvious, right? From where they were 10 years ago to where they are now. And then just seeing the roadmap moving forward. So, I mean, as far as friendly, uncompensated partnerships go, I like Couchbase. I like the team there, and they seem to like me, and we get along pretty well.
Great. I was wondering if we could chat more about kind of a modern project, what you in your mind describe as like, a modern application, and what were some of the challenges that you faced, and, how did Couchbase as a platform or technology help you get over that? Is there a customer you can highlight or client you can highlight without, naming them? And
Yeah. So I've talked a few times about the pharmaceutical industry, and, one of the things we have there is compliance, with, it's not HIPAA data for us, but there are pharmaceutical regulations. And then there are just compliance with the contract. So you have a big, stodgy, world dominant pharma company that thinks in the old world, all your data has to stay in the building. What does that even mean in the cloud era, right? Like things like that, and educating them out of it and helping deliver. This is why we had requirements like, well, okay, but you can't put our data on any third-party service. We'll approve AWS, but you got to keep it in your control, and we have to have your SOCs and all those things, right? So I say, okay, there's one constraint. The other constraint being that we have high real-time needs for data ingestion through ETL-like processes, and it's a little more robust for us than just extract, transform, load, but we're doing a lot of things to moving, transitioning, enriching, normalizing data. And we have, with one of our flagship customers, we have 8 satellite offices around the globe, each of which manages all their own data. And there's no good master data management between them. So we kind of have to build that. So to me, what's the modern part about this problem is the landscape of cross data center replication. In other databases, you can do things like foreign data wrappers, or you can do, master replication or master slave replication, read only replication. You start building around those things. For us, this came into the notion that we have this interesting customer pattern where we kind of look at it like a hub and spoke. There's a customer who has these 8 satellites around the globe and a team in Europe that wants to be able to look at all the data across all of those. And they currently can't do that today. So first step, we just build data ingestion pipelines to pull from all their 8 data sources into one Couchbase in Europe. So one nice thing about Capella was that it let me, pick my region, right? So I pick Frankfurt and I run it there. And now we have all this data in there. But these customers also enter unique data there, and they want it available back in all those other 8 places. And now we have a problem where, okay, all the data is coming from, say, CRM, coming into a central place. We're letting people edit it, augment it. We're pushing it back out to those CRMs. But now we have satellite users who are all over the globe, and a lot of them are on slow networks or intermittent networks, or just it's fine locally if you're in Brazil, but if you're trying to hit our site in Europe, it's not great. So we want to run an edge node, and that's why I called it a hub and spoke model. So the hub and spoke model was really pretty simple with Couchbase, because we run all of our data ingestion into the one true master Couchbase cluster in Europe, and then we run XDCR going out. And we can put rules and filters on those so that we have processes that tag data so that we can say only replicate out to these edges the data that's allowed to leave Europe. Now, we have users at all these satellites entering data into the system, just like we have in Europe. And we need all that data in Europe. So we have XDCR rules that say all of the user-generated data around the edges in these locales get XDCR replicated back to Europe. But if I enter something in Japan, I eventually need it in Brazil. So it's got an XDCR to Europe and back to Brazil. And we have that set up. And the asymmetric nature of that replication is great, because it means that I can have the outbound rules from Europe setting only allow things that are allowed to leave Europe, whereas the inbound rules is give us everything, because Europe is the strictest. It's okay to put everything there. So in the end of the day, if someone in Europe enters something about a European citizen, you have to be on the European instance of our app to see it. But if someone in Japan enters something about a Japanese citizen, you can be in any of our instances and see it. And doing this kind of hub and spoke cross data center replication with asymmetric replication is, I think, a somewhat modern pattern because of the emerging needs around data locality. I think more and more we will see Canada, Switzerland, India, Australia, they're putting out these laws. And, I assume we'll have it in the US at some point too, where data can't leave your region. And you got to be smarter about how you do data center replication, how you do backups, how you do all those things. And so Couchbase just provided a really good tool for us to solve that without a ton of engineering.
And so in terms of Capella now, with the latest release, it's going to be more accessible in terms of having not only an MVPC, but a hosted option. It's moving to our latest version of Server 7, which has scopes and collections. The free trial is going to be super simple for people to get into and start up and fire up a cluster in like 2 minutes. What do you think that means to new people trying and getting on board with Couchbase in terms of experience of that who've never done it before? Like, any thoughts or advice to people and given that environment?
Yeah, I think at this point it's probably faster and easier to sign up for Couchbase or for Capella, and it's at this point it's easier to sign up for Capella and spin up a cluster in a few minutes, connect to your AWS. My recommendations would be read the docs first and just get your ducks in a row. You need to set up an IAM connection so that the Couchbase management plane has the ability to spin up instances and things. And you need to get ahead of, the way it works under the cover is a bunch of ELBs and nodes and VPCs and Kubernetes things, all these things that need to talk to each other. And if you're going to just start day one, you're probably fine. But if you're going to do anything bigger than a 3-node cluster, you should get ahead of it in AWS with lifting your limits. If you have limits, the default AWS is going to give you pretty small limits. So, all this is in the Capella documentation. So my advice is to read that before you dive headfirst in. But, honestly, if you just follow the tutorial, dive headfirst in, you're probably working just fine. And with the newer Capella stuff coming out where I don't even have to have my own AWS, I think that gets even easier. And then now we're on the level of, I think this compares comparably to things like Mongo's, I think it's called Atlas or something like that. And then, AWS, RDS or Aurora or Dynamo, where they give you these little 5-minute getting started. I think Capella is in that game at this point for getting up and running. And then going from there to real world, my advice would be data modeling. I'll figure out your data model before you just dive in. And really that's going to help you think about your indexes for Nickel, your indexes for FTS, and your document structure, and think about your keys. How you use your keys you can just use UUIDs and have keys be somewhat anonymous, or you can do something more like a URI path where your keys have slashes in them and you can kind of segment them. And then maybe you can actually get to doing things from your relational system, porting it in here and getting a quick evolutionary path towards a faster experience using more key value and more nickel. So yeah, I think that would be my advice for someone just kind of at a high level getting started. And I guess I would say pick your SDK. One of the reasons some of the other database vendors have been successful, in my opinion, is because they focus so much on the SDK. They may have made an inferior database with a better SDK, and they're going to win hearts and minds, right? And so I think the latest investments we've seen in Couchbase, they've been releasing improvements, bug fixes, performance gains to the Node.js SDK. Seems like every week. I mean, maybe time flies, but yeah, they're pretty often getting updates. Active community there. I don't work with the Java or C# bindings, but I know that they're getting as much love. So Couchbase trending in that direction, I think, using the latest SDK is pretty straightforward for us.
Right. Okay. So Scott, one other thing I wanted to ask about was microservices and development trends. Where do you think Couchbase plays in that scenario?
Yeah, so one of the kind of golden rules about microservice development is each service gets its own database, and so you could say, okay, I have 20 microservices and each one gets its own Couchbase cluster. That's a little absurd, right? And I also don't want every developer just picking their own random database. So I want to pick a database that lets me say, all of these microservices can use this database as a platform, but still have their independent isolation. So one of the things coming out in Couchbase 7 that we're really excited about is scopes and collections, because it gives us a few extra layers of granularity to control user access. And so the way we're looking at this is a microservice, we have in Couchbase, we like to have a bucket per customer environment deployment. Each one of those buckets has its own connection credentials, and it's segregated from the other customers per the compliance rules that we have to live by. But I don't want to run, 400 customers. I don't want to run 400 Couchbase clusters, right? I want to run one big one and just keep growing. And each time we just need more space, we just add more nodes and we just add a bucket for that customer. Now, as we talk about microservices, each customer is going to really be running their own bucket to keep things segregated, but I want to have services that only have access to specific swaths of data. So if you are the user service, you can own, you as the service code can only touch the user collection. And then if you're the doctor service in case of pharma, right? Like you can only touch the doctor collection, and we can actually give those separate credentials. They can still run in the same bucket. They can still use the same shared parameters for replication factors and redundancy and performance. And it really gives us a nice pattern to be able to say, I don't have to give every service its own whole database. I just kind of scope, narrow it down to collections. And then with scopes, we're looking at using scopes for environments. So if I have a customer bucket for customer X, they can have a QA scope and a beta scope and a prod scope. And underneath there, they can have individual collections that map to each one of our services. And then through our service layer, we'll have a multi-tenant service, but it will know through our tokens how to connect to which database, which scope, which collection. And we can manage all of that with a separate service, obviously for credentials. But this really just models well. On the other side of the stack, we're doing the same thing in the front end. We want to make, React.js UIs where this page is its own Webpack component that can be pushed independently. I want to be able to say the team working on the user service can update their service, they can update their UI, and they can update their the data in their collection. And so scopes and collections work really well. I think if you weren't using Couchbase, it's not the end of the story for microservices. But in Postgres you have schemas and you have tables, but trying to do more complex RBAC around those tables, I think it just seems a lot cleaner to me doing it in Couchbase with collections and scopes.
Right, makes sense. One other thing, final question. sometimes we think about Couchbase from a standpoint of, benefits for the developer and benefits for the architect. And I think in your role and your scenario and the way you interact with clients, I think you probably look at combine all of those things. Do you see it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or do you see it more as Couchbase as a beneficial platform for developers or for architects, or why? How would you break that down?
Yeah, for the architects, I think that not having to think about much more than capacity and, capacity in a few axes, because you have the multidimensional scaling, but it lets me scale search service differently than key value service or, whatever I need. And that's cool. It gives me the right knobs to turn. But I don't have to think about adding additional machinery in between services when I get that all in one shop. Right. So I do think there's a good, hey, architect, here's one less thing to worry about. And when you talk about Capella being hosted, look, today, nobody I know runs their own SAN, right? They use S3. Nobody runs their own CDN edge network. They just use CloudFront or Akamai or whatever, Cloudflare. And I think more and more databases are that. Why not focus on my business value instead of architecting robust, scalable, distributed computing systems when there's a product out there that does it, right? That's not my company's core IP. It's not my client's core IP. So I think as an architect and as a consultant, to be fair, having a tool in my toolbox that I know I get the job done with is important. And it's just one less thing to think about. We've got a million other things to think about. So I think from an architect perspective, yes. From a developer perspective, I think there's some winning of hearts and minds with an SDK that they're not used to. And if I'm out searching for a developer pool of people that have experience with Couchbase, that's going to be harder than, say, Mongo or Postgres. But on the other hand, I get those developers, and they have a pretty quick learning curve on Couchbase. It's not hard for them to get up to speed. The thing I really do like about Couchbase for a developer that I didn't have on our previous hosted database was I can do local development offline by just running Couchbase server in a container in Docker. So our development environment has several microservices. It does have a Postgres database. It also has a Couchbase database. It also has a Redis. It also has a few other little pieces. And we have a Docker Compose file for local development that can basically run all those containers. So we want to test out our system with a new Couchbase version. We can get the new version of the container and drop it in. We have data seed tools with the CB import type stuff, the tools that come with it, to be able to just have seed data for tests being flushed out of the bucket and reset super fast in between every test, for our end-to-end testing. It was pretty simple for us to wrap around the Couchbase SDK with a kind of a repository layer so that we can mock it out for unit tests pretty easily. And, the APIs are pretty simple when you're writing your code to be get and put. It gets a little bit harder to mock it with the more complex features, but I really think there's wins for developers there too. And it's fair enough for a developer to say, "Hey, I've never used Couchbase. Ooh, that sounds like a learning curve." And I think there's some gotchas when you get big and you're trying to do complex stuff. But most of that has come down to really, I think, understanding your data model and building the right indexes around it and right query patterns around it. And when you say it like that, you have that problem with any database. You have to do that stuff right regardless. And Couchbase, I think, for better or for worse, relies on you doing those things right. So it can be unforgiving if you write bad queries and poorly designed indexes. And every database is going to be unforgiving at some level there. I think it just hits earlier with Couchbase. So where a new developer might feel a little bit of a barrier to resistance, they get through that, then I think it's pretty much smooth sailing. So like when I'm hiring or I'm getting new developers on the project and they're like, "Ooh, what's this Couchbase thing?" I just say, "Hey, just get into it, stick with it." It's kind of like one of those TV shows your friend tells you to watch, and you watch the first two and you say, "This is boring," and they go, "Just wait till episode 4." I feel like that's the developer experience with Couchbase. So easy sell on the architects. Developers take a little nudge, but they're happy once they get there.
Well, we're hoping the new free trial with Capella really makes it easier for people to get started. We have done a lot to get things up and going super fast with hosted and the tutorials and stuff. So we're trying, working hard to make it as easy as possible to make that first step. So.
Yeah, and the tutorials look great. The travel sample, as everyone who's touched the SDK knows of. I can't say that I've used them myself because I've been using Couchbase for long enough that, but we've had some new developers on our team just go play with the sample, just download the container, play with it. And in a day they're going, okay, I think I'll get it. And they're coming in and working on existing code that touches Couchbase. So
great. Cool. Well, Scott, thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it and all the insight. Thank you for joining us.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.